All right. Well, Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Friday. Yeah, Friday. Free for all. Looking forward to talking to you. Hopefully, yeah, definitely give me a call if you want to talk because this is your opportunity. There's always an opportunity, but this week I had some other guests on. I think we had three, right? Carlos on Monday. We had a Carlos Monday. We had an Arlen Tuesday. And we had a Jack Socrates, if you will, Thursday. So now is your chance. And I'm going to respond to comments I got from various folks about the programs I did this week. So definitely be commentary. So that's your, free for all because your words, your thoughts will be addressed directly by me today on Halitics. Let's just start in Gaza. We'll also get to some news stories as well. Let's just start in Gaza. And the situation, it just every day is worse. More people killed. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The actual numbers, a little bit less yesterday than we've seen in recent days. And it's interesting because the Israeli military is occupying Gaza City, as I understand it. But I guess they're just not shooting people at this moment. So I get, or at least not that many, 65,200 is the figure that the toll is approaching, hasn't quite reached there. Still more dying of malnutrition. It's horrific. It's what I saw a movie last night I watched from TCM. That's pretty much my go-to for entertainment these days. It was called Assignment in Brittany, and World War II movie about a French soldier who becomes a spy for the British military, British Army during World War II. And there's a scene where he is taken prisoner, and various members of the French resistance who had helped him are paraded, or he's paraded before them, and they're asked if they recognize him, and they're told in no uncertain terms, if you don't say who he is, we're going to kill you. And that includes a 12-year-old girl. It's like a family of resistors and friends and a village. And they all say, we don't know him. We don't know who he is. And then a few scenes later, they show the spy himself while he's in prison being tortured. They direct him to look out the window and watch as the resistors, the people who had helped him, are machine gunned down, including the 12-year-old girl. So that's what the Nazis did. That is very reminiscent of what Israel is doing now. We have a count of 65,174 dead officially pursuant to the health ministry in Gaza. That's 33 more than we had reported dead yesterday. We have a count of 12,600, more than that killed since Trump took office by him and Netanyahu, and obviously the Israeli military, Israeli occupying force. So this is the worst thing, I think. And I said this, and I've been saying this, I don't know what could be worse that I've seen in my lifetime. I don't recall the bombing of Cambodia. That would seem to be the closest analogy. I think it certainly struck, in hindsight, when I remember learning of it, struck me as genocidal. Millions killed. This is not in terms of numbers at that level, but in terms of clear intent, perhaps even worse. This is from a friend of mine on Facebook, shared this. Aaron Bastani, I don't know who he is, I guess a journalist, and I looked this up to confirm this was accurate. I can't stop thinking about one sentence in today's UN report regarding Israel's genocide in Gaza. Israeli security forces. Now, this quote comes directly out of that report. Obviously, they did a lot of research. The UN reporters, whoever they commissioned to complete this report, absolutely wrote this. This is taken verbatim. Israeli security forces shot at and killed civilians, including children who were holding makeshift white flags. Some children, including toddlers, were shot in the head by snipers. Think about that. Toddlers were shot in the head by snipers, by Israeli snipers. That's the military that we're fully supplying with those weapons. And, I know people who I actually have always had respect for, who I believe are kind people, kinder than I am. And they're for it. I mean, I don't know. They would say, well, we're not for killing children, but they support Israel. They support the Israeli military. It's beyond me. I don't understand that. It takes a certain willful blindness. I was very critical of those who, the mourners for Charlie Kirk, people who didn't, obviously not his family. I understand you know somebody, they're part of your life, you love them, they've been kind to you, they're knitted within the fabric of your day-to-day activities. Of course you're going to mourn. And I guess people who knew Charlie Kirk from videos, from maybe seeing him on campus one time, maybe they felt, the media is so powerful, you begin to feel as though people who you've never actually met or maybe met in passing one time, they become part of you. And that's very dangerous, actually. It's a very dangerous phenomenon. But I was critical. I'm like, look at what Kirk has done. I believe he's done harm. He's dividing us. He's breaking us down by identity rather than trying to unite us by economic interests, by values. And I have a huge problem with that. That's why I've been as critical as Kirk in the past as I have been. But what he's done pales in comparison. Well, and he in the past was very, very supportive of Israel. The theory that Candace Owens has been floating, and maybe, there's evidence that Kirk really was starting to pull back away from full-throated, unconditional support for Israel. There absolutely is evidence of that. There's evidence that his financial backers, people like Bill Ackman, were not happy about this. They were not thrilled that Kirk was platforming at the TPUSA conference. Dave Smith, who's, speaks with great moral clarity about Israel's crimes. So there was real discontent. There's reports that even Trump was frustrated with Kirk because Kirk was saying to Trump, you got to stop this stuff, stop supporting Israel. That is plausible. It may be the case. And to the extent that you believe Israel might kill anybody, and I do, we know they will, because they put explosive devices in pagers, knowing that little, kids would be killed. They don't care. They don't have any reverence for human life whatsoever. So would they kill Charlie Kirk if they thought it was in their best interests? I believe Israel would. Did Israel think killing Charlie Kirk might be in their best interests? I don't know. They might have. But what we know today seems to clearly indicate that Israel was not involved. Tyler Robinson, as far as whatever we've seen that's been released, would seem to have acted because he was angry at the fact that Kirk's transphobic rhetoric, it was perceived to be transphobic. I think it was transphobic. He was totally against, for example, and I haven't got the clip, but totally opposed any type of care, any kind of, what do they call it, gender affirming care. And that doesn't just mean gender affirming care, doesn't just mean surgery or hormone treatments. It means you talk to them and say, yeah, it's okay. Yes, you have a penis, but you are internally inside a woman. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You are, for those purposes, your gender is female. Your gender is a girl. Your gender is a woman. That's fine. I think that's good. I think people who suffer from whatever you want to call it, gender dysphoria, should absolutely be provided that type of psychological support. And not with the idea that there's something wrong with them, that they are mentally ill. But no, hey, to say this is okay. I totally support that. That's very different from Charlie Kirk. Now, you want to get into arguments about whether pre-adolescence or adolescence should undergo reassignment surgery or hormone treatment. I'm somewhat on the fence there. I still haven't come to a complete decision, and I don't even lean in any one direction. But I don't believe there's anything wrong. What does normal mean? There's nothing. You're not mentally ill because you are a trans individual. It's apparently Charlie Kirk believed you were. And he fomented disdain for, contempt for people who perceive themselves to be trans, who are trans. At least that was the sense that Tyler Robinson had, and I believe that's what caused him, as far as we can tell, we're speculating here, there's no indication that Tyler Robinson was motivated by Israel, by a fear that Kirk was pulling back from Israel, by some midnight phone call from Netanyahu or Ackman. It seems so, what's the word I'm trying to come up with here? It just seems very, very, very unlikely. So I'm going with Occam's razor. The likeliest explanation is the true one. A young man from Utah who was a good shot, had been raised with rifles in his family, had discovered he was in love with a male who was in the process or wished to transition, and as a very young men are wont to do, his emotions were close to the surface and he reacted. And I believe that's what caused the killing of Charlie Kirk. It wasn't anything else. But Kirk did support before he pulled back. There's many clips out there. The one that most offended me, that most upset me, was when he denied that there was such a place as Palestine, denying thereby really the ethnicity, the existence of the Palestinian people. Huge problem with that. So that's bad. But as far as I know, Charlie Kirk never killed anybody. He did express support for Israel, and that for me is very problematic. I don't get the mourning for Kirk when you look at what Israel is doing, but I really, really, really don't get people who support Israel at this point. It just seems, I don't see how that could be. They are shooting children. They are killing toddlers. They are starving a population. And whatever you think of Charlie Kirk, it appears that Charlie Kirk was against that, was moving away from that pro-Israel perspective. And for that, hey, I applaud him. And for that reason, if assuming that's accurate, it seems as though it is, it really is a tragedy that, it's always a tragedy when a young person is killed, but it becomes even more tragic when this is somebody who could have brought our country to a better place, maybe, if he had really continued, because he had a huge following. He had huge levels of support among younger conservatives. And those are the exact people that Trump would be afraid of come the midterms. Those are the exact people that Trump would most likely be willing to change policy to accommodate. So there was a chance there. There was a point of leverage that may have been lost. And it's very, very, very unfortunate. What about the opposition? I talked about progressives. That was my show Wednesday. And I spotlighted this interview by Anand G. See, I'm not going to even try his last name. I heard him say it, and I was like, man, I can't do that. So I highlighted this interview of progressive, right? He's considered one of the most progressive Democrats in Congress, Ro Khanna, by Anand G. And I said, this is not going to do it. These guys are the reason when you watch this interview, and you listen to it, you can see why Democrats struggle so mightily. I'm going to cover myself up so you don't have to see me twice on the screen. Here is the thumbnail, though, and I wanted to show it because you can see the bottom. Khanna and Anand G deftly sidestep the need to tax billionaires out of existence by insisting that heartland rage boils down to a lack of respect. So that was the theory. That was the theme of Wednesday's show. I got a little bit of pushback on that theme, specifically the claim in the subtitle there that they sidestep the need to tax billionaires out of existence. And there was a response to that. We'll get to that response in just a moment. I do want to urge folks, hey, if you aren't part of Halitics on Facebook, do so. Do join. Become a contributor. Love to have you there. Just as long as you're civil. That's the rule. That's the one rule. I'm really, really, really enforcing that. You just can't insult, attack personally our members, our participants. It's just not going to happen. I will not allow that. I'll just delete your post. I'll remove you at some point if you can't be civil. That's the one thing. And I push myself very, very aggressively also to be civil, not to be a troll, not to poke people, because it just messes everything up. It makes it impossible to have conversations. I haven't been perfect. I'm trying to be better. Subscribe. Click the bottom right blue and white square on your screen. I want to see if I can see it there. I'm looking at the wrong place. Blah, 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 blah. Where is my video here? Yeah, revisiting Ro, Harris, and Stein. We got 6 people watching, by the way. A lot of people watching. For me, I know some people are like, they have 600, and they're mad about that. For me, that's good. Hey, call in 240-242-5646. Would love to hear from you. Get your take. Both parties are traitors. Please, 2 thumbs up. Thank you so much for that. The thumbs up. 240-242-5646. Would love to hear from you. And actually, I better check my ringer because I didn't do that yet. So it could be that someone was trying to call me and I didn't hear, but I can see that nobody was at this point there. I can hear the ringer now. So if you call in, I will get you on the air. Faux-gressives, did I mischaracterize the dialogue between Anand G and Ro Khanna, where I say, hey, they don't address the real issues. They don't take on the billionaire class. They don't discuss the real problems facing Americans, and that's why Democrats lose. Was I fair to them? Well, at least one of my viewers says I was not. Here is the comment. You can see it right there on the Facebook page if you want to look. And I certainly would urge you to, and I would urge you to click and listen and watch and view. From Varmont, I have no idea who Varmont is, 123. What are you on about? They are for a wealth tax. So, wow, I looked at that and I thought, what did I miss? Because I always think when I get criticized, when people say, and I don't mean criticism like you're a commie. I mean criticism, you got it wrong. And what I had said was, they sidestep the need for a wealth tax. Varmont says, what are you on about? They are for a wealth tax. So I went back and I looked at that whole video again. I wanted to be sure I got that right. And this is instructive, I think. So where did Varmont get that from first? Because I did not at any point hear them specifically say, we're for a wealth tax. In fact, my first go round, I didn't even hear the topic come up, which was a bit remiss on my part. I should have, because if you look specifically at even the Substack, right? There's a Substack. This was posted on Substack by Anand G. If you look at the Substack, I highlight it. We talk with Representative Khanna of California, and here's what we talk about. Why Democrats need to give up on focus groups and poll testing, recognize their message has real problems, and come up with a new vision on Gaza, on failed trade deals, on a wealth tax, and more. So wealth taxes, I believe, mentioned in one point. But my critic there said they are for a wealth tax. And in fact, that does not ever make it into that interview. There's no statement by either Anand G or Khanna. It's about Khanna. It's not about Anand G. He's just asking the questions. He doesn't say he's for a wealth tax. At no point At no point does he lay out a policy prescription for America. He doesn't say he says we need to address Gaza, but he doesn't say what the policy should be. And to me, this is a huge problem. This is the exact problem we're talking about. The Democrats don't provide, even the far left Democrats don't tell us the kind of America that they will work for if we elect them. They don't say this is what we want for our nation. And for that reason, I don't think they're going to win elect. They can't win. You can't beat something with nothing. There's some decent stuff in this interview. I'm going to go back over it because I think it's really important. But in the end, and it's so, we talked about this with Jack. I should call him Catholic. He used to be called Catholic Jack. Now it's just Jack. With Arlen, they say you have to vote for Democrats because Republicans are so bad. And if you don't, it's your fault. It's the Democrats' fault because they don't try to beat Trump with something. They try to beat him with nothing. And it's not going to happen. 240-242-5646. Yes, Cal and MD voters, thank you. Both parties are traitors. Please do check out Butch Ware and Andy Else. We're trying to get Andy back. I'm going to really try to get Andy back on the program. He's awesome. Here is Anand G and Ro talking about, what are they? I can't even. Okay, yeah. What have the Democrats learned? This is like my biggest thing. Hey, you lost. Remember we played that? I showed you yesterday in response to, during my conversation with Jack, how the Democrats lost bigly to Jill Stein among Palestinian and Arab voters. And they even lost amazingly to Trump among that same cohort. So let's hear from Khanna. This is, by the way, well, we'll play it and I'll stop at various points. Let's go.
To change. I know I have never been able to change anything in my life without like a really painful degree of self-analysis. I'm sure it's the same for you. Do you think the left, Democrats, progressives have done an adequate amount of that since November?
And I'm going to stop it here. Now, you can't tell from the video, but this is because I clipped it. So you see this is 1 minute or so into the clip that I took out. But this is the last 8 to 10 minutes of a nearly 40-minute interview. So the earlier part of the interview is what I showed on Wednesday, which is where Khanna says, here, the lesson I learned is respect. We just have to show respect. Doesn't talk about policies in that earlier section of the interview. He doesn't say this is what we need to do to show poor, struggling, and working class, middle class voters in the heartland. This is what we need to do to show them that we're on their side. We need to adopt aggressive, pro-Main Street, anti-Wall Street policies. He doesn't say that. He says the one thing we need to do is show them respect. Here's Anand G later in the interview, towards the end of the interview, asking him specifically, what lessons have the Democrats learned? Have they learned anything? Are they going to change in any way? What does Ro say?
No, and I don't want to pick on Senator Schumer, but I'll say, quote him fairly accurately.
I'm going to stop that again. I want to play that clip right there because that struck me so forcefully, this statement here.
An adequate amount of that since November?
No, and I don't want to pick on Senator Schumer, but
so why don't you? See, that statement alone, I don't want to pick on Senator Schumer. Why don't you want to pick on Senator Schumer? Schumer has been an absolutely abysmal leader of the Democrats in the Senate. You're a Democrat. His leadership, in quotes, has been devastating for the party. You've lost seats. His willingness to bend over backwards to accommodate Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema really cost the Democrats any legitimate opportunity to adopt the kind of pro-people, progressive, populist economic policies that could have staved off Republican advances in the midterms in 22 and the Trump win in 24. You Schumer is doing everything possible now to kneecap the one legitimate hope that Democrats have going forward, Mamdani. Why aren't you? Why wouldn't you want to pick on this guy? This is what Democrats are so sick of, a complete unwillingness on the part of Democratic electeds to go after their leaders. And you don't see that on the right, do you? We've seen over and over where Republican rump, the right wing of the Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, call them what you will, the Tea Party, they go after Republicans. In fact, Taylor Greene has gone after Trump himself on Epstein and on Israel, Gaza. So this statement by Khanna is very problematic and really tells you where the Democratic Party is. It's a top-down, buttoned-up party that will not challenge its corporatist, elitist leadership. And we're going to see that all the way through, despite the claim that they're for a wealth tax.
I quote him fairly accurately. Right after the election, he said, well, the problem isn't with the Democratic message. The problem is with getting the message out. And so much of the analysis has been, well, we need to go on Rogan. We need to go on podcasts. We need to get the message out. We're up against a difficult attention economy and ecosystem. And I don't deny that we've got to do that. But there are problems with the substance of the message.
Let me stop it there. So that's good as far as it goes. He is saying, yeah, it's not just that we're not stating our message clearly. You know, he says we have to show respect. That was his big message, is the message should be respect. But he does say there's a problem with the substance, right? He does acknowledge that. What he doesn't acknowledge, at least in this clip, he will a little bit later on, is that maybe there's a problem, not just with the message, but with our policies themselves.
About Gaza. We've got to talk about...
So let me stop it, because he said, so what does he say? Does he say we've got to change our policies? Do we have to do something different? No.
With the substance of the message. Like, we've got to talk about Gaza. We've got to talk about the trade deals that hollowed us out. We got to talk about why we weren't able to raise the living wage when we had all branches of government. We've got to talk about, are we going to actually be for taxing billionaires and a wealth tax?
All right, let me stop it. So remember what the criticism was. The criticism was of me when I said to, when I promoted my Wednesday podcast, that they're for a wealth tax. What are you talking about? What are you on? They're for a wealth tax. I didn't hear that. Let me play that again. I want to play that whole thing. Are they for, by the way, are they for a different message in Gaza? Because that's what I think Anand G said. We have to change our message on Gaza. Is that what he actually says? He doesn't say exactly we have to change our message. He says we got to talk about Gaza.
I don't deny that we've got to do that. But there are problems with the substance of the message. Like, we've got to talk about Gaza. We've got to talk about the trade deal.
But what are you going to say about Gaza? See, that's what I want to know. I don't want to know you've got to talk about it. What are you going to say? Are you going to call Israel a genocidal state? Are you going to demand that all American support for Israel stop? Are you going to say, as I want you to, that the U.S. military should be deployed immediately to prevent any further deaths in Gaza, including separating the Israeli military from Gaza and distributing essential food, water, fuel, and medical supplies? Because that's the message I want to hear. But you don't say that. You just say we got to talk about it. Well, what are you going to say about it? That's what I want to know, Khanna. You say we got to talk about the trade deals. What are you going to say about those trade deals? You're critical of them. They hollowed us out. You acknowledge that. Are you going to say we got to repeal them completely and we got to maybe embrace tariffs, right? That would seem to me the response. That's the opposite of free trade.
Hollowed us out. We got to talk about why we weren't able to raise the living wage when we had all branches of government. We've got to talk.
So why don't you talk about it? Why didn't you? Why didn't you? He's telling Anand G here, this is what the Democrats need to do. Well, you're a Democrat. You've got clearly a pretty sympathetic host in front of you. Why aren't you talking about those things? Instead of telling us you got to talk about them, actually talk about them. Because you know why? Because the billionaires who back the Democratic Party don't want him to. And even if he doesn't take money from them, he's got to hear from Hakeem Jeffries. He's got to make sure he doesn't say anything that's too critical of his party or he'll lose whatever committee assignment he has. By the way, Hakeem Jeffries, guess who voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the leader of the Democrats in the House? Well, guess who voted for him? Ro Khanna, one of every Democrat who did.
Are we going to actually be for taxing billionaires and a wealth tax?
So he said, we got to talk about whether we're going to be for it, not be for it. We've got to talk about whether we're going to be for it. So he doesn't come out and say he's for a wealth tax.
Be for a Marshall Plan for America that actually invests in these communities, and how are we going to do it? And I think there's got to be more focus on the substance of what this party should stand for.
Why doesn't he tell us what it should stand for? See, that's what I want. You're a leader on the left, right? Correct? Khanna, why don't you tell us what the party should stand for? Why don't you give us that vision that you're saying the party needs to present?
And a conversation about that, instead of simply just thinking, well, if we had a more glib, articulate, charismatic, younger spokesperson who had millions of following, that somehow...
you know who had millions and millions and millions of followers? Bernie Sanders, 2016. Was he particularly glib? Not really, no. Is he charismatic? I don't think so. He's a crotchety old guy. You know why he had so many people following him? Because he talked specifically about policies, because he did talk about a vision where there were good jobs, where we no longer embrace free trade, where we stopped with all the billions of dollars being sent overseas. He wasn't great on foreign policy. I think he was better than some people give him credit for. Why don't you present that vision? That's what we need, Khanna.
He would be able to win, because look, Trump had an attention economy, but Trump also had very specifics. They were horrific.
Now I want to stop it here, because this is really important what he says here. And this is something I agree. And this is something I've been saying over and over and over. Also, I just want to make this point too. I don't disagree with everything Khanna says, obviously. I don't even disagree that he needs to talk about these things. I just wish he would talk about them instead of telling us we need to talk about them. I think it's pretty disingenuous to say we need to talk about something and then not to talk about it. I also would say that this type of rhetoric from Khanna is exactly why we need to go with the Green Party, because they don't just talk. They have a real platform. They have specific policies. The candidates do. They do have a vision for a better America. And that's what we need. And until the Democrats come up with that, A, they're not going to win, and B, they won't deserve to win. Now let's go back to what Khanna says about Trump.
Because look, Trump had an attention economy, but Trump also had very specifics. They were horrific specifics. But
all right, I'm going to stop it there for a sec. So yes, he presented a specific set of policies, just as I mentioned yesterday with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk went after DEI. He went after affirmative action. He did it in what I think a particularly mean-spirited way. Now, I personally have some sympathy for his position. I do think it's very problematic when you have different standards in terms of test scores, GPA, what have you, different standards for different groups. I think that's a problem. I think there are reasons you might do it. I think there are serious societal challenges that need to be addressed, and that this was an attempt to address those. I don't think it was the right way to do it. If you're going to go after affirmative action, if you're going to go after DEI, as Charlie Kirk did, I think it's incumbent upon you to address the very serious challenges that are facing the groups that are supposed to be the beneficiaries of affirmative action. Charlie Kirk never did that. So a real problem with Charlie Kirk. But the fact is, by going after affirmative action, by going after DEI, Charlie Kirk was saying, hey, life will be better for you, my audience, my followers, my supporters. Life will be better for you because we won't be giving these slots that should be yours. Now, of course, we can argue whether they should be his audiences or not. I mean, I would argue they should be for the most qualified people, the people who have achieved the most when it kind of demonstrated the most aptitude and have achieved in whatever area is relevant. So, I'm not saying these spots should be reserved for anybody. They're not anybody's. What should be reserved for everybody is healthcare. What should be reserved for everybody is a safe, secure home, a retirement with dignity, education that's debt-free, post high school, and everything before that should be free. So that's what the message should be. But that wasn't Kirk's. Kirk's was a divide and conquer strategy, and I have huge problems with that. Khanna now is saying Trump had specifics, but he says they were horrific specifics. Some were, others not so. Rounding up immigrants, dividing families at the border, those are horrific. Building a wall, that's horrific. Supporting Israel until the last Palestinian is killed is horrific. But let's listen to what Khanna calls horrific.
Tariff everyone. Let's
tariff everyone. All right. So the tariff issue, again, we need to protect American manufacturing jobs because American workers are paid a lot more than many people overseas are paid. And for good reason. It's much more expensive to live here, A, and B, we have made a decision in the past in this country that you shouldn't be subjected to slave labor, to subsistence labor, to, barely able to survive labor. That's not the case. But if you're going to have that rule, then you got to recognize that employers will, if they possibly can, move their manufacturing plants, wherever there's places of work, of employment, where they can hire people at a cheaper wage. That's just what employers do. That's the way capitalism works. You always try to reduce the cost of inputs. So if we're going to say workers need to have a decent wage, which Khanna already even said, why didn't we raise the minimum wage? Then you got to protect American jobs. And I don't know any other way. Honestly, there's plenty of other things you can try to do. You can put up, limits in terms of the amount of items and goods that come from certain countries. You can stop trading with them, whatever. But nothing's as efficient. Nothing makes as much sense as tariffs. So to say tariffs, he says let's tariff everybody. No, that's not a smart policy. I wouldn't call it horrific.
But Trump also had very specifics. They were horrific specifics. But let's tariff everyone. Let's stop all immigrants.
That's bad. Yeah, the immigrants policy, and even not just stop, but rounding people up is horrific. Absolutely horrific.
Not just attention. It was, you got shafted. Here's what we're going to do. And those positions were radical and extreme.
All right, so he said radical and extreme, and I disagree with him. But then he doesn't provide any alternative. So, again, you can't beat something with no. He says we have to talk about it, but he doesn't talk about it. He just says we have to talk about it. Let's play a little more because Anand G follows up with a question that I think really mischaracterizes what Khanna said.
When I listen to you, I think of you as someone who's doing something very interesting, which is in some ways you're saying...
This was the weirdest thing. So it's like, look at the face of Anand G. He's like, what's going on here? It's like Khanna's like, oh, there's some sound, there's some noise. What's going on? It's very weird in the middle of this. But let's continue.
Go ahead.
Look at how he's all discombobulated. I would be too if I was Anand G. It was really like a strange interruption there. But I guess there was someone in Khanna's office that was calling for him. I'm not sure.
On Gaza, for example, you're saying the party should actually take on things that are, in a way, further to the left in the...
Right, let's stop that. Let me play that again, because this is where I think he's just totally doesn't totally, he mischaracterizes Khanna. He tries to rehabilitate Khanna here. And I have a problem with that. I don't think we need to rehabilitate
things that are...
Go ahead.
On Gaza, for example, you're saying the party should actually take on things that are in a way further to the left in the conventional thinking of where it is and be brave.
Does he say that? See, that's what he says, on Gaza, you're saying the party should take on things to the left. When did Khanna say that? The only thing Khanna said about Gaza is we have to talk about Gaza. The only thing he said was we have to talk about Gaza. Now, he'll get back to it in a little bit. But until this point, he hadn't said anything except we have to talk about Gaza. That doesn't mean to the left of where the Democratic Party is by any means. Right, let's continue.
About that. And then you're also saying, look, this party should talk about patriotism. This party should reach out to MAGA folks, right? I think you have a vision of a breadth of who a Democratic Party should be speaking to.
So this is your progressive left media, who Anand G, it's ridiculous. His paradox is no paradox at all. He's saying, well, first you're saying we should take on some leftist positions, which Ro Khanna never said. And then you're saying we should also talk to people in the heartland about patriotism, as though they're not consistent. But people in the heartland don't want us to be killing Gazans. They don't want us to be sending billions of dollars overseas to either Ukraine or Israel. Those are progressive populist positions, and they're patriotic as well. People in the heartland want health care. They want single-payer health care. There is nothing contradictory in saying, yes, we need to move to the left on economic issues, and we need to talk to working class folks and try to appeal to them, because that's how you appeal to them. But Anand G is accepting this, and maybe, he's some sort of, I think he went to Harvard. Khanna is from a very wealthy, I don't know how wealthy his family was. I think they were pretty affluent. He is very wealthy. I think they can't seem to understand maybe that poor, struggling, working class people actually are really, really progressive on economic issues. They seem not to get that.
It is both further to the left and further to the right of where it is speaking right now. A lot of people in the chat are asking, so I'm sorry to embarrass you. Is that something you would be interested in pursuing as in a national campaign yourself? And if you don't want to answer it that way, I'll give you an out of saying, what do you think a presidential candidate in general who could convey that breadth would look like?
I thought that was a pretty good question. It took a long time to get there. What would a presidential candidate who could appeal, right, look like? And I would say maybe like Bernie Sanders, but 45 years old, not 75 as he was in 2016. I think something like that would be a good answer. Somebody who can speak with great clarity and precision about the economic challenges facing Americans and how we can we can address those challenges and enumerate. Medicare for all will save our country billions and billions of dollars, save taxpayers billions of dollars because it's much cheaper and more efficient than for-profit healthcare, and will also lead to better outcomes, better healthcare for you. We are for tariffs. Now, we're for a much smarter tariff policy than Trump is. We want to target imports from low-wage nations that generate a lot of profit, because we should be making those items in this country. That's how you do it. You talk about these specific issues that clearly impact on poor, Australian working class Americans who have abandoned the Democrat Party, and how your policies will make life better for them. It's not that hard. It's just not that hard. Raising taxes on the billionaires. It's not that hard to do.
Well, first of all, I'll give you the cliched answer, but which is also actually true, is that we have to really focus on the midterms, because if the Republicans are in charge in the House of Representatives, 2028 is going to look very, very differently. I mean, if our democracy rests on Speaker Mike Johnson certifying who the next president is going to be. So
that's a fair point. I mean, I think that's a legit fear mongering that's based on reality. It's really important for the Democrats. I mean, again, I would love to see Green Party candidates elected. I don't know who they're going to be, but yeah, I agree with that. It would be really bad if Republicans keep the House of Representatives after the midterms next year.
For the House is extraordinarily important and urgent. And I think even for the House, we've got to articulate, at least we probably don't need a vision, full comprehensive vision, but what we do need is to recognize the energy of people like Mamdani and to bring it.
So again, I don't know why you say we don't need a vision. I think a vision's incredibly important, even for the House, because when people are voting, they're going to want to say, what will this do for me? If I vote for this representative, for this candidate, are they going to fight for me? Are they going to go into Congress and fight for policies that will make my life better? If they have a D after their name on the ballot, what does that mean? Does it mean they just presented a lot of platitudes? Or does this mean they're part of a group that's really going to fight tooth and nail to make my life better?
Those folks in the tent and to mobilize with all of our party. I do think on where one place is on Gaza. I mean,
so here's back to Gaza. So remember, Anand G said you want the party to move to the left of where it was on Gaza. So let's hear what he has to say. What should the parties? Because he didn't anywhere else say. Right? No vision. No. Well, we really need to embrace Medicare for all. I embrace it. I call on my fellow Democrats to embrace it so we can win elections.
I have a clearer view on that for the midterms because
here's what he says. Let me go back to that because, again, I want to make sure you hear what he has to say about Gaza, what Khanna has to say about the democratic messaging, what it should be around Gaza.
One place is on Gaza. I mean, we've got to have a clearer view on that for the midterms because
we just have to have a clearer view. He doesn't tell you what that view should be. Why not? Tell us what the view should be. It's genocide. Israel needs to be stopped. Israel needs to be cut off. We will vote to cut off funding for Israel. But you just say a clearer view. So again, this is not progressive. This is just mealy mouth. This is just platitudinous.
As people want to whitewash Mamdani's win is all about affordability. And I'll just tell you, having been on the ground, that that's not the case. Yes, affordability was the case, but a lot of the moral vision came from what's going on in Gaza. On more broadly, I would just say this.
I'll stop it there because we played a lot of this clip. But he's identified, he moves on to other topics. But Khanna there invokes Mamdani as a Democrat who does talk about the vision thing, right? Who does speak with a certain moral clarity, who does address Gaza. And what did he say? He says it's wrong. He says, yes, I would arrest Netanyahu. No, I will not go to Israel. Yet I think he's used the word genocide. I'm pretty sure. So if you're going to say that Mamdani won the primary and will almost certainly be the next mayor of the city of New York if the latest polls are any indication, yes, he has used the terms genocide and apartheid, I believe, to describe Israel. At least that's what Politico says that the ADL claims. Of course, can't really trust him, but I'm pretty sure he's used those terms. So what Khan is saying is we've got to. Here's what. He's used that term. So what Khan is saying is let's look to Mamdani as an example of a candidate who's using issues and rhetoric in a way that's appealing to voters. But then he doesn't say how we should emulate what Khan is doing. I mean, Mamdani's doing. He says, yeah, Mamdani speaks about Gaza, but he doesn't say we need to adopt his message. So again, I'm not persuaded that Khanna is seeing the light, that Khanna is going to present a true progressive vision, or is calling for Democrats to present and pursue a true democratic message. So, again, we need to go in a different direction. Certainly not Republican, but we need to be very, very supportive of alternatives to the Democratic Party, because they are not committed, quite simply, they're not committed to a progressive vision, a progressive America. There's just no commitment, none. They're not going to talk about it. They're not going to campaign on it. They're certainly not going to embrace the policies that we need to make America a better place. And if Ro Khanna can't do it, who can? Who can? Guy who's got many millions in the bank, who's, as far as I know, very popular in his district, who will get reelected without any difficulty. Even he isn't going to speak out against the corporate elites in the Democratic Party and the policies of the party. Yesterday, move on. Yesterday had a really great chat, I thought, with Jack. Loved speaking to him about his column Socrates Speaks, which is excellent. Socrates on immigration policy. And that program included a lot of pretty harsh rhetoric directed at Trump from both of us. I didn't pull any punches. I think Trump's been off. I admit it. He's worse than I even feared he would be. Got a comment from V Cubed, which I thought was very interesting and worth addressing. Hal, do you and Jack realize those who lost the election to Biden and Harris felt exactly the way you and Jack feel now the last 4 years, which I guess is, he's saying, feel fear, anger, that the country's on a very, very dangerous direct path. And I respond, well, I get it. I mean, I think there was a lot of that. I think a lot of people looked at Biden and Harris and said, these are bad people. These are dangerous people. These are people who are taking us in the wrong direction. And guess who those people included? Me. I have huge problems with the Harris-Biden presidency. I didn't support them. I made it clear. I didn't vote for Harris. I was extremely critical of many of her positions. That said, and I can understand perfectly well why Trump won, and I will not shame, embarrass voters for Trump, because the alternative was Harris. Unless, I mean, the real alternative was Jill Stein, and that's who you should have voted for. But my response was, thanks, V3. I hear you. But I don't think, but that said, I'm not going to say it's totally an equivalency. Harris Biden were really, really bad. On some issues, worse, especially Ukraine. But objectively, I don't think Biden and Harris threatened our domestic freedoms to the extent that Trump is already infringing on them. I don't think that's arguable. We didn't have these troops, these thugs, as I think it's fair to call ICE, patrolling the streets of our city, just rounding people up. We didn't have that under Harris Biden. Now, Harris Biden did really bad things. The crackdown on college protests were really bad, but certainly seems like Trump is prepared to be a lot worse. So I don't think that Biden and Harris were as bad when it comes to certain aspects of our freedoms and democracy as Trump. But I am sympathetic to the criticism of Harris Biden that Trump voters will provide, depending on what it is. But yeah, their support Ukraine, this and that. That's fair. They're corrupt. Yes, a lot of corruption in Harris Biden, especially the cabinet when it comes to foreign policy. So I'm sympathetic to criticisms of Harris Biden, for sure. But I'm also sympathetic to criticisms of Trump by Harris Biden voters like Jack and Arlen. I think those are also very legitimate. I'm sympathetic to both parties when they criticize the other. Where I'm not sympathetic is when they start defending their own candidates. No, these were bad, terrible candidates. And people who were selfish and self-centered, who are only in it for themselves, both sides. Incompetent. So I get what you're saying, Jack, and what I'm trying to do is bring people together in opposition to both parties. And so I don't always do that. I fail a lot of times. Did I say, Jack? What I'm trying to do, V cubed, is bring people together against both. All right, this story got a lot of attention. Jimmy Kimmel, I'm not sure if he's quite fired. He's on indefinite suspension. So I'm going to play the clip. I'm not going to take a typical, I guess, left of center, hand wringing and how awful this. I don't think it's good. I don't think Kimmel should have lost his job or be suspended. But his remarks were, let's just say this, inaccurate, shall we say. Here we go.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from.
All right, let me stop that there. Oh, I already did stop it. Look at that. We'll get rid of that. Get rid of that. Turn that thing off. There we go. So the kid who shot Kirk, who killed Kirk, Tyler Robinson, assuming that's who it is, and I think that's a pretty fair assumption, notwithstanding Candace Owens and some other conspiracy people, he's not MAGA, right? There's no reason to think. Now, he says, Jimmy Kimmel says, trying desperately to spin him as not one of us. But where does that come from? Where does the evidence, where's Jimmy Kimmel's evidence that Tyler Robinson was MAGA? Those texts that we saw, they don't show him as MAGA. Nobody said he was MAGA. I guess his grandmother at one point said they're all Republican or something in his family. They're all conservative. But a lot of people said he was not, he had different politics than the rest of his family. So Kimmel is wrong. He's wrong to say that the MAGA crowd was desperately trying to say he wasn't one of them. He wasn't one of them. The problem they have is they were trying to say he's some sort of left-wing nut. That's what, and I don't know, can you even be a left-wing nut? I don't know. Is that like being a stupid Mensa member? I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. He was, as far as we can tell, somewhat apolitical. We don't know what his politics were. There's no way you can glean politics from what's been shared so far. And no evidence has been adduced. But for Kimmel to say he's not one of them, not one of MAGA, that they're desperate to try to say he's not one of MAGA, he's strongly implying he was. Well, he doesn't have that. That's not borne out by what we know so far. So if he was MAGA, he wouldn't have had problems with Charlie Kirk's hate that you can't negotiate out. And in fact, the justification for the crime, Robinson's justification for killing Kirk, is there's too much hate. I can't negotiate it out. You can't negotiate with that. Well, that's not MAGA. That's not a MAGA statement.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from.
Well, they are trying to score political points and claiming that this is the left. So he's right about that. But to say he was MAGA, no, that's not fair. That's not right. Now, should he be discharged for that or suspended? I don't think so. I would say absolutely not. But maybe that isn't even why he was suspended. Let's play a little more here.
On a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction. Demolition, construction.
All right, so I get why Trump wouldn't like that, but it's totally appropriate. You know, when I first watched that clip or heard it, I thought, well, did Trump even hear the question? Did he get that Charlie Kirk had been invoked at the beginning of it, that the questioner, the reporter, had asked him how he was holding up in the wake of the Charlie Kirk shooting, because there was a lot of noise in the background. You can hear it in that. Maybe Trump didn't hear it. But if you watch the video, it's clear he can hear. He understands the whole question. And rather than say, hey, yeah, he could have, all he had to say, if he really, because he's been using, the reason it's such a big deal is because Trump is talking about my friend Charlie. He's such a great person. The Democrats are so insensitive. They don't care about him. They hated him, whatever. You'd think if he loved this man so much, he would have been a little more broken up and he would have said, yeah, it's really tough. I'm getting over it. It's been a struggle. I'm glad at least, I got something to distract me, which is if he had said something like that and then started talking about the new ballroom. Okay, fine. But he barely acknowledges, he does a little bit, but barely acknowledges it. And by acknowledging it, he shows he did hear the question. Let me play it one more time for you.
On a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk.
See, he says that he's nodding. Thank you. See how he nods? Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. So clearly he's saying, the questioner is bringing up Kirk and saying, how are you holding up? And it's clear, and over the last day and a half, which is since Kirk had been shot, since the news came out that Kirk had been killed. So presumably the question should be understood. I understand it to be, hey, talk a little bit about your feelings about Kirk and how it's his murder, the murder of Charlie Kirk, has impacted you.
Sir.
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction.
It's really bad. It just looks very callous. It looks like he doesn't care at all. And that's totally fair game for a comic. That's totally appropriate for Jimmy Kimmel to bring up. Now, I didn't love that he said that MAGA is trying to distance, trying to pretend that this guy isn't part of them when he wasn't. I mean, there's no reason to think he was, that Robinson was MAGA. So I don't like that. I don't think you fire someone or you discharge them or suspend them for that. Is that why he was suspended? Well, here's an interview with the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, who was very, very critical, harsh words about Jimmy Kimmel. But he gives you a hint why I believe there might be a different reason, or an additional reason, shall we say, besides simply people offend the offensive comments, supposedly offensive comments of Kimmel.
I want to come back to where we started the conversation in Jimmy Kimmel and your contention, perhaps, that these shows do lose money. We just did a quick look. I mean, the show is supposed to be profitable, Chairman, not necessarily on advertising revenue, as you note, given ratings, but affiliate revenue, carriage.
See how he's like snickering? Because apparently, and I haven't looked this up, the ratings for these shows, these late night shows, are terrible, and they pay them huge salaries, tens of millions of dollars. I know what Jimmy Kimmel's contract. So to me, it's an economic decision in the end. If he was making these network execs, if Jimmy Kimmel is making these network execs huge piss pots full of money, they'd keep him on, I believe. Now we've come to a point where there's so much media consolidation, and there basically are, if not monopolies, oligopolies of media. The billionaire owners, the profits may not be so significant to them at this point that they care more about the politics than anything else. So they don't want left-wing or liberal people like, Colbert or Kimmel on anymore. I didn't even know Kimmel was. Kimmel's not even that liberal. Kimmel used to do a show with, I can't remember, did he do Sex Lines or something, or Love Lines, I guess? That was a pretty ugly kind of sexist program, as I remember. He did it with this other guy. I can't remember his name now. It was a pretty, I thought, very sexist program. So I'm not even convinced Kimmel's that progressive or liberal. Adam Carolla. and Dr. Drew. He did a lot with Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew. So I don't buy him as some sort of lefty or anything like that. He did go after Trump. Presumably that's what his audience wanted. He went after Kirk. Presumably maybe that's what he believed. The real factor, though, again, is, he might have offended his bosses. Sinclair is very right wing. We need much more media. We need to break these companies up. We need to break them up nationally, so that we have lots of locally owned affiliates, and we need more nationally owned stations too. But in the end, they're all kind of dying. They're dinosaurs. People don't watch these shows. People are on YouTube. People are on TikTok, which apparently has been sold. People are on alternative media. And that is what's going to be the future. But I'm not going to be shedding too many tears for Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think he should have been terminated for his statements or be suspended or whatever. I do have concerns that it's a right-wing Christian group, Sinclair, that's doing it for sure. But I also think there's a good chance the economic argument was the one in the end. This guy just isn't making us money. Okay, just a few more comments. I guess I could end the program. It's been over an hour, but I just want to get these in because it is the free-for-all. And I would love to hear from you, 240-242-5646. I still have the same people watching as I've had before, but no one calling in. So, by the way, yes, thank you, Sid. Adam Carolla, I looked it up. I should have just looked at the chat, and I would have seen it was Adam Carolla. By the way, you agree with me, Kimmel's not so lefty, is he? I don't know. Tell me what you think. This is from Eric on Facebook. Hal, you're one of the few leftists who's able to critique the failures, corruption, and dysfunction on the left, including the way that Dems sold out and mutated into being puppets of oligarchs and the professional managerial classes. Absolutely. I certainly believe that. I don't know how many people on the left will say this, but I agree. There aren't that many. There should be more, which is a big reason I keep doing this, because I think the message is really important. And I think that if we're going to try to make our country better, we need an alternative, obviously, to the Republicans, because what they're doing, I believe, is absolutely horrific. And we also need an alternative to the Democrats, because what they have been doing has been also really bad. So, yeah, I'm with you, Eric. So he says, in response to my demand, yes, Buttigieg hosted for Kimmel before. Interesting. So that's not that liberal. Stop all the corporate subsidies and not progressive. Stop all the corporate subsidies, this is Eric, and other government supports, including mega banks, and billionaires will disappear due to competition. Tax them out of existence won't happen and won't change the deeper problem of a dysfunctional corporate state. So Eric doesn't like my call for 95% plus top marginal tax rates on billionaires, and says that won't do any good. And then he made a very interesting addition to it, so I want to get it on one ball before I respond. And I just said we'll address in tomorrow's Halitics, and then there's a thumbs up and a care. World War I taxes created charities, NGOs, non-government organizations, which evolved into organs of the deep state. Banning corporate subsidies and all federal taxes would go a long way to restoring 100 years of destruction of democracy by such corrupt organizations. Okay, let me get into this. First of all, I really was interested, and I didn't look it up. I didn't research. I totally take your word for it that the World War I taxes created charities, NGOs. I believe that because I think what probably happened, my speculation, is that contributions to charities and NGOs were tax deductible. So what the billionaire class then, the captains of industry, the rulers of the Gilded Age, decided was to avoid paying taxes, we'll give money to so-called charities and NGOs, which we can deduct from our income. We give them, let's say we make $10 million. We give $1 million away, then our income now is magically $9 million, not 10. So we pay tax on the 9, not the 10. We can reduce our taxes dramatically that way. And we say it's for charity, but really these are charities that are going to promote a corporate agenda, a corporatist agenda. So in the end, they'll make us more money. So that's their investments, right? And I believe that. I think that sounds exactly right, and I accept that. But I don't agree that we should not have much higher top marginal tax rates or that we should avoid federal taxes. The world that you describe, Eric, as I don't even as I understand it, the world that you describe was the world of America at the end of the 19th century. It was a world without federal taxes, federal income taxes. It was a world with, I don't know if there were corporate subsidies. I'm guessing there were corporate subsidies when it came to railroads, for example. But I think for a lot of these other companies like Standard Oil, they weren't corporate subsidies. They just, John D. Rockefeller had a monopoly, was able to, produce tremendous amounts of oil at a very, very cheaply and then sell it and make gobs and gobs of money. And there were other trusts as well. It wasn't just Standard Oil. There was JP Morgan. There was U.S. Steel. There was U.S. Sugar. So these were naturally accumulating. These are naturally evolving monopolies without more government intervention. So and that's exactly why we had the antitrust law, antitrust developed with Teddy Roosevelt. That's federal action. It was essential. It helped our country generate a true middle class by breaking up these companies and forcing them to compete. But even that's not enough, because you still had, for example, even with 7 oil, Standard Oil becoming 7 companies, John D. Rockefeller was still the functional equivalent of a multi-billionaire during the Great Depression. And only massive, top marginal tax rate of over 90% that only impacted him. He's the only one who paid it, was able to create a society with a relatively fair and just distribution of wealth and income. So I think you do need those taxes. I don't think our experience shows that when you have some kind of unfettered competition without government intervention, the market magically creates, leaves us with lots and lots of different companies that are all fighting tooth and nail for consumers and fighting tooth and nail for the best employees and paying good employees good wages because they need them and keeping prices low because they're in competition. That's not what history has taught us. So I think I definitely agree or certainly accept your description of the use of tax deductions to create organizations that are anything but charitable. I don't agree that this is an argument in support of getting rid of income tax, because then people won't try to avoid taxes. I think the answer is to have better tax policy, to be much stricter about what kinds of what kinds of organizations we're going to deem charitable and we're going to deem worthy of being, beneficiaries of tax deductions for the donors. All right, 240-242-5646. Before we finish, I wanted to just talk about this. I was, and I wasn't going to, and I often don't talk about these sort of, I don't know, what do you call them? They're not really fluff pieces, but it's not politics exactly. I just was reading this on my computer maybe a half hour before showtime, and I guess the caption, the headline caught me. My relationship with alcohol is not complicated. I love it. This is from a woman. Usually men are more likely to be alcoholics, but I understand that women who have a problem with alcohol is particularly bad for them. Alcohol is particularly bad for women. And I will say this, I have never believed, and I don't believe that I have ever had an alcohol problem, but I've been drinking less and less lately. I sleep better, basically down to 1 drink a day per week. So 7 drinks. They say you can, up to 2 is okay. I've really cut back, and I go many days where I don't drink at all. Maybe I have a glass of wine, what have you. Some might say, well, I do. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think it impacts on me. I have a problem playing chess online. That's a problem for me, an addiction to online chess. But I will say the less I drink, the better I feel. My relationship with alcohol is not complicated. I love it. It's just that it's horrible for me. And she goes on to describe a bunch of problems with it. But what really struck me about this description of this mom, because it's about her husband and daughter, is not her alcohol problem, although she definitely describes her situation that I think would be very problematic for the people in her life and for herself. But she's talking about her 5-year-old daughter and how she's raising her daughter. And I don't think this has anything to do with her alcohol problem. So she describes her daughter. She says, lately, Marceline, 5 years old, has been trying to learn how to stay dry through the night. So she has a bedwetting problem, clearly, without an accent, pee accent in her bed. So I struck a deal with her. If you can stay dry. I was like, what? So I struck a deal with her. If you can stay dry through the night for a whole week, we'll take you to the place Charlotte had her birthday party. And the story opens with Marceline crying in tears because she wakes up, she'd wetted her bed, and she's not going to get to go to the Olympics. She calls the birthday party place the Olympics. So she was so excited. Oh my God, I just have to stay dry. If I go for a whole week, my reward is, and she calls it a bribe. I'm going to bribe her not to pee in her bed. My reward is, I get to go to the Olympics, meaning this, like, it's not Chuck E. Cheese, I don't know, whatever it is, some birthday place for kids. And I'm like, that's like the worst parenting I ever heard. Not about, of course, you always are going to bribe your kids. I mean, I prefer to see it rewards and consequences, right? You act the way we want you to act, you're rewarded for it, you get a benefit. And if you don't act the way we want you to act, there's a consequence, a negative consequence. You do that where a kid has control, where the kid can make a decision, where the kid presumably has some agency. So, like for my sons, if you keep your room clean for a week, then you get this. And if you don't, you don't, right? Because presumably they have some agency over whether they keep their room relatively clean, if they put their clothes away. Or even more importantly, if you don't leave your crap all over the family room, then you're going to get a little reward at the end of the week. We're going to keep a track of whether we have to clean up after you or not. Because kids have some control. They can just, and I'll give you the roadmap. Every time you leave the room, before you leave, you turn around and you look around and you say, did I leave anything here? And then if you did, you pick it up and you move it to where it's supposed to be. And we'll even help you with it. Because you have control. But if a kid is wetting their bed, they're not wetting the bed because they're not getting a trip to the Olympics, in quotes, to Chuck E. Cheese or whatever. They're wetting the bed because they don't have control over their bladder. That's all. It's just that simple. It's like a sneeze. We'll give you a trip to the, to dinner. We'll take you out for dinner if you don't sneeze after you breathe in all that ragweed. Well, you can't control yourself. What kind of a ridiculous bribe is that? I don't understand. This is the worst parenting I ever saw. If you don't want your kid to wet the bed, here's what you do. Wake them up in the middle of the night. You know what? Let's say that the kid, because they wake up, because kids who pee the bed, they wake up when they pee in the bed. They start crying. Like this little girl started crying. I don't get to go to the Olympics. Like you make her feel bad. You shamed her too. It's not like she's committing a crime. This is the worst parenting I ever saw. So let's say that every night between 1 and 3, or every other night when she does wet the bed, it's usually between 1 and 3. So at 12:30, wake her up. You go in and you say, it's time to go to the bathroom. You don't even have to like shake her. You just take her by the hand. You take her out of bed. You take her into the bathroom and you say, pee. That's all. Then she won't wet the bed anymore. I don't understand. This was like the dumbest anecdote I've read in a long, long time. All right. And on that note, I hope you all have a great weekend. I look forward to talking to you Monday. And thank you so much for being part of Halitics.